If you're interested in learning more about BetAngel, its tools and the opportunities they present, then why not visit betangel.com today and download a free trial. So it's Thursday morning, we're halfway through Cheltenham, and so far it's been fairly predictable, I think, in terms of the way that the markets have evolved. They look very similar to last year, with a couple of exceptions which we'll talk about in a bit. But generally it's behaved in a similar manner to that which I'd expect. And surprisingly, or not surprisingly, depending upon your viewpoint, the turnover on the first 2 days was almost exactly the same as last year, which is a bit of a surprise. We sort of expected it to be around there, but I didn't expect it to be absolutely on the nose in terms of turnover being exactly the same. That seems a bit odd to me. You'd expect a bit of natural variability, so to see the first 2 days exactly the same volume as the previous year, it just strikes me as slightly strange. But it could be a fluke. Anyway, that's what we've seen so far, exactly the same turnover as previous years. It's interesting to note that actually BetDAC is down on prior years in terms of the percentage turnover that it's doing against Betfair, and in terms of total turnover as well. Not sure what you can read into that. But Betfair is pretty much flat year on year, and like I said, done exactly the same turnover. So we're expecting about 120 mil for the entire meeting. So, you know, I think that in general most of the markets have traded exactly the way I expected. I don't think there's been anything particularly unusual in there, with the exception of what happened yesterday, which I'll talk about in a second. And when you look at the cards today, we're alternating. We've got, you know, shorter price, longer price, shorter price, longer price. So it's going to have an unusual feel to it today. You're going to flip-flop one way and the other. Whereas the first 2 days have been generally quite competitive handicaps, punctuated with a couple of real shorties. So I got off to a funny start on Tuesday because, of course, you know, Cheltenham, Aintree, Royal Ascot, where people asked me for tips. So I looked at the card on Tuesday, and I realised there was a horse in there, layback, that had refused to start repeatedly. So I said, well, if you're going to do anything, just don't back that horse, because it's not going to win, because it won't even start the race. And of course, it won. So this is why you get to look a mug repeatedly, because if you try and offer tips, it's if it fails, people will let you know, and if it wins, then people will say, well, you know, simple choice really, wasn't it? So yeah, that was hilarious, and that explains also why I don't punt and I prefer to trade, because of course I made money on the race, and it was an irrelevance whether that horse started or not. But so far, you know, if I look at the 2 days, it's sort of mixed. I'm trading on Betfair and BetDAC at the same time, and I'm predominantly using a couple of different strategies, and I'm doing some automation as well. So it's complete chaos in here. So generally during that period when all of the races are on, I'm probably going to be a little bit busy to be able to comment, but I will pop up and, you know, say things as they go along. But generally I'll review things at the end of the day and then look at things going forward and reflect on what's happened over the day. But because of all of that activity, I'm tend to be pretty tied up for long periods of time, and it's getting quite intense. And also, as I said in the video of the preview, what I'm tending to do is get involved in the markets a lot earlier than I used to as well. And so I've just been looking at the first race of the day behind me here, and watching some of the activity on that. And that was quite interesting to have a quick look at that. I've just seen some unusual stuff going on the second favourite. So I'll make a note of that and carry on. But typically I am trading for quite extended periods of time. Typically it's 5 to 10 minutes before the off, and at Cheltenham I will go for a good half an hour perhaps, with different positions depending upon the style of the market. When you look at the big markets that we've had through so far, they've been necessarily on the real short priced favourites. So we had a winner on Tuesday at a very, very short price, and then we had the shock of Duvan not winning yesterday. But you know, I have to say, I would. It's not a strategy I would ever pursue, backing a horse at very, very short odds, especially over the jumps, because you never know what's going to happen. And obviously there was a lot of speculation about what happened with Duvan, and the yard came out last night and said he was lame potentially at the back. So you know, not the sort of thing that you would catch me jumping on at all costs. And also, when they're at very short prices, and particularly at Cheltenham, you tend to find that in fact the market's generally pretty accurate overall. and it generally gets the odds more or less right, and there's very little variability in it. And so I wouldn't suggest necessarily laying things at typically short odds at Cheltenham, because the market's probably there or thereabouts. However, you know, if you see incredibly heavy backing of something, then that may be something you want to oppose. So we saw Linger yesterday in the 1650 that was really, really heavily backed. But of course, it doesn't really make a lot of sense when something gets really heavily backed, especially in a competitive race. So, you know, what's changed in those 10 minutes before the start of the race that could possibly warrant that level of activity? So the 1650, which we'll talk about in a minute, was an unusual race for sure. But generally I've been pretty consistent. I haven't done anything spectacular yet. I haven't had any major disasters yet. I've just been pretty consistent, which is sort of where I expected to be. I'd sort of mark myself sort of an 8 out of 10 so far, because I haven't had anything amazing, and I'm still looking for that amazingly massive trade. And that hasn't really come around. Maybe I'll have to wait until Friday and the Gold Cup to be able to achieve that. You never know. I'll just do the best I can with what's in front of me, and away we go from there. I think the markets have generally been fairly, well, nothing's ever easy, but easy to moderate to read. I don't think most of them have been particularly difficult. And I've recorded some video, and I do this all the time. I record videos of myself all the time so that I can go back and review. I say all the time, most of the time. So I can go back and review stuff at the end of the day. So if, for example, you watch my comments on this next video, you'll see that I'm talking as well, either to myself or somebody else, about what I'm seeing. And that's something I'd recommend you do. It's quite helpful to enable your trading. But you can see on this little clip here how I was talking about something before it happened. And if you keep your eyes peeled, you can sort of see these pressure points building, especially in the big markets. And then eventually you'll probably get a trade out of it. So yeah, have a quick listen to this clip, and you'll sort of see the thoughts that are going through my head. Slightly shorter price, it's going to move around a bit more. But it's the second favourite, Vroom Vroom Merc. There's 16 grand at fours. Could very easily break down if that money goes. You'll have to keep an eye on that one. And as if by magic, that's exactly what has happened. There you go. I can see the future. I think it was fairly obvious, actually. So probably the most interesting race of the first 2 days, apart from the Duvan debacle, was the 1650. And it was a really odd race for a number of reasons. And I was doing pretty well on that race before the market just suddenly changed. And one of the predominant characteristics was that there was a horse called Linger that was being backed very, very heavily. And that's unusual to see something being backed that heavily at a higher quality meeting. But nonetheless, the money was coming for it very seriously, and that was putting a lot of pressure on the rest of the market. And the interesting thing that happened in that market was that most of the pressure seemed to build on the second favourite. And the second favourite actually just popped up, and that caught a few people unaware because Linger was much further down the book and a lot of people didn't see that. This was actually the first 2 races on Tuesday I didn't do particularly well on. I think I made a minor loss on one, but you know, that's typical for me at the beginning of the day. At the beginning of a meeting I'm quite cautious and not doing anything, but I generally had a fairly clean run through all of them. But on the 1650 yesterday, it sort of fell apart a bit, to be completely honest, because when that move came on the second favourite, I wasn't ready for it, and the price shot out, and it just, I was up a couple of £100 and it suddenly vanished, and everybody panicked, and the price was going all over the place. The charts, if you look at the charts here, we'll do chart number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4 over that particular period, and you can see it was just mental. And you know, it flew out way too far, and then eventually corrected itself past post time, just before the race was about to start. So a bit of a crazy market. You don't tend to see that very often at the big meetings, but it did remind me of the chart at the Grand National of Monbeg Dude. Have a look at the chart from yesterday on the second favourite and on Monbeg Dude, and look at the comparison between the two. So I've actually captured that particular race on video, so I'm going to look at it in greater depth and look at all of the data, try and understand exactly what the cause was and why it reverted as well. But yeah, that was a very, very interesting race yesterday, and very unusual as well for this particular meeting. And I managed to escape with a relatively small loss, but it could have been a lot worse because I was a bit overexposed in the market at that particular point. Fingers crossed I'm not going to see that again on Thursday or Friday. But overall, you know, things have been going fairly well. I mentioned earlier that the volume on BetDAC is falling, which is disappointing. But I've managed to bang in some pretty consistent results on BetDAC. So nothing spectacular, just very consistent. You can see over the course of the first couple of days that I haven't made a single loss, but I just haven't achieved anything spectacular there, which is a little bit disappointing, to be honest. But that's me adjusting to the market conditions. Hopefully I can push on a bit and make more money over the next couple of days. And Betfair's been fine. I pulled in some bigger results there, but it's been a bit more variable. It's been a bit more hit or miss. You know, some races I've done really well, and other races I just haven't done as well, and I've just overcooked it, pushed it a bit too far, or something like the 1650 has happened yesterday. So overall, I'm sort of, you know, I'm fairly neutral. I'm not saying it's amazing, I'm not saying it's really bad, I'm sort of somewhere in between all of that mix. And of course, we've still got 2 days left, so I can still get that massive result out of the card. Turnover is pretty much exactly where we expected, and it's varying up and down according to the quality of the race, so nothing unusual there. But I think that yesterday was a little bit harder for most people, but that's quite normal because the quality and the prize money dips a bit on a Wednesday. But then of course, you know, we accelerate upwards today and then again on Friday. It's absolutely huge. So yeah, we're only halfway through. It's not unusual for the first 2 days to be slightly different to each other, but I'm hoping that we can build on that. And of course, the feature today is that we've got shorter prices and more competitive races mixed in today, so that's going to present a few opportunities. And hopefully we won't see anything like the craziness we saw on the 1650 yesterday. And but there are no shorter prices on the cards today, like a Duvan. And you know, with Willie Mullins not winning a race yet, you suspect that that's going to influence the market on Thursday, Friday. So that will be interesting to keep an eye on. But you should go into the forum and check out the Cheltenham thread, because there's loads of good chatter going on there that can give you a good steer on how it's trading on a minute-by-minute basis and what we expect to see. And I'm posting stats and updates and best trades on that particular thread. So for example, I can tell you that if you laid the second favourite or backed the third favourite and so on and so forth, I can tell you what themes run through that, and there are some interesting stats out of that. So make sure you go onto the forum and check that out, where you can find that information. Anyhow, I hope the rest of Cheltenham is good for you.